Okay, we are live. And thanks everybody from Facebook land and Discord land for joining us. We have both Larry Bond and Chris Carlson from the ATG. Welcome. And very happy to not only meet you both face to face for the first time at least, but just to have a nice talk about what ATG is up to, what they've been up to for the past, let's say, a few years or more in developing Harpoon of late, Harpoon 5. So I thought I'd just start the ball rolling with just a couple questions. Later, towards the end, we'll open it up to questions and answers from the group. You're welcome to put your questions in the YouTube channel now if you want, and we'll just scroll up and look at them later as we answer them. So first, let's see. Let me ask Larry, what was your intention with Harpoon 5 in particular? And do you feel like, I feel like we all feel like you were successful, but do you feel like you were successful at least your original intention? And did that intention change over time as well as the rules were developed?
I think saying it changed over time is entirely correct. Our intention was to simplify or abstract the rather complex mechanical processes that were involved in running some games. Typically, most Harpoon games, you start out with this very slow search process. You're hunting for the other guy. You're trying to figure out where he is, and then you're going to launch some sort of attack. And fine, you find him. You launch your salvo of 87 missiles, and the game slows to a crawl because you're pushing these little counters in, and other little counters are coming out, and then you're rolling to assign different counters to different. And did I hit him? No. Okay, then that counter gets moved up. And Chris and I have been trying for almost 20 years to figure out a better way to do it, a faster way. It's not necessarily, well, I will say it's a little simpler. You still got to look at the rules. You still got to understand the rules. But it substitutes a few die rolls for what could be dozens per turn. And that was a real high priority for us. It took us a couple tries. We had one naval system that we took to a convention, and yeah, it reduced everything to just a couple die rolls, and everybody hated it. So we had to, go back to the drawing board and try something else. The miniatures gamers wanted to see the Zulus coming over the hill and getting picked off one by one as they get closer to the formation. They wanted that visualization, if you will, and that was missing from the nodal concept. I mean, Chris, what do you want to add? What do you think the main goal was?
We were going to try and find a way to make it so that people could run large-scale engagements in a reasonable amount of time. And the one way to do that was to get away from doing all kinds of detailed measurements. When you're moving a whole bunch of these counters and you're measuring exactly how far it's got to go on both sides, because we did the SAMs at the same time, you have a lot of people manipulating things on the playing surface. And that just really slows things down. And then you go through the combat resolution phase. By going to those tables, we did the geometric math for you up front. So yeah, you kind of have to know where your counters are, but you can do that with a simple dice. A six-sided dice tells you which increment you're in, and you know how many shots you have from when you can start to engage to point defense. And that won't change as long as the target is coming towards you. And that really just simplified things up right away. We also had to kind of do it because we folded in reaction time, because that was a huge thing we learned when I went up and started rummaging around the Naval War College archives.
Yeah, we got a lot smarter over the past 20 years about different aspects of naval warfare. And for instance, I used to in the first few editions, radar detection was automatic. Or we used a cookie cutter where there was an X% chance if you were within this distance. But Chris found stuff at the War College where there was a drone coming in from a particular bearing at a particular time, and I think you give that the alerted operator bonus, and it sailed directly over the ship without anybody ever seeing it. And it wasn't that they were off playing Pokemon or anything. They were staring at the screens and they just never saw it. How do you model that in a miniature setting? And then Chris twigged to the fact that it's the question you're really answering is, when am I detecting it? Not how far away. When am I detecting it? How much time am I going to need to shoot at it? And by going into that time dimension, that enables us to really simplify the process.
So how many major revisions? How often were you meeting? Were you play testing it for a certain period of time and then re-meeting and discussing it offline? How many playtest groups were involved? Is that?
We've got a core of playtesters that we work with, and we can send stuff out and ask them to play it. Some of them are very, very avid Harpoon players. We were getting feedback from them on some of our ideas, and they would suggest stuff on their own and say, hey, what about this? We had a lot of the two other things that were really important in this new edition were, one, 20 years of naval technology, meant new sensors, new types of guidance that had to be folded in, and we were also covering a span of 1955 to 2020, and some of the differences really popped out at us when we looked at that. That you cannot treat a ship in 1955 the same way as one these days. And the capabilities are different. That led to the combat systems, which also fell out of our work on simplifying anti-air warfare. And that also led to us developing the fire control rules, because it turns out that just because you can see him on radar doesn't mean you can let fly immediately. No, it takes a little while to put things together. And it's this whole time thing. The biggest change, if I was going to summarize the big things in Harpoon 5, it's time, and how important time becomes in fighting a ship.
And also how certain systems have that very slight sliver of advantage in that timing, which is something I never appreciated until I read and played these rules. Just how difficult it probably would have been in a large engagement between the U.S. and Russia, in particular.
When Larry talked about the drone flying over the top, one of the documents I found was a early 1970s Center for Naval Analyses review of multiple exercises, air defense exercises, and their conclusion was 1/3 of the time an incoming drone was not detected or a solution generated and there was no shot. So they weren't entirely saying they didn't detect them, but what happened is they didn't think they had a good enough detection to warrant a shot 33% of the time. That's a massive amount of missed opportunities, as it were. But also, to answer your question, we also did some blind tests at conventions. We ran 3 or 4 full-scale scenarios at convention settings, basically taking people who were, reasonably experienced gamers and knew our game system, so the whole mechanics process was very familiar. But we then threw them all this new stuff, and got some really good feedback from them, some really good data on perception from a player's perspective as to what worked and what kind of didn't.
So when you, as you were developing the rules, were you providing them mini scenarios to test? Were you very clearly saying, "Hey, this is what we adjusted. Can you try to break this?" Or, I'm assuming that's how you approached it. You were kind of like, "Break this,"
Well, usually you'd have to encourage them to break things,
Okay.
but these guys. I mean, have you ever heard the expression "murder board"? It's a Navy expression for Chris. I mean, it's not just the submarine community, is it?
No.
Okay, it's basically a bunch of guys who get together and do the best to tear apart whatever you've been working on, and that was just their default mode. And yeah, normally we would send out a scenario, and we would certainly identify the rule mods, because normally it would be in response to something that they were talking about or asking about. And okay, we're going to try doing this time. And I would say the full front burner effort to get Harpoon 5 from bits and pieces of what we tried to a finished game took what, 2 years, Chris? I mean, from the time that we said, okay, we're going to focus on Harpoon 5 now.
Right. Yeah, from the time that we actually said we were really going to sit down and do it, it was 2 years. But you and I had been doing tinkering on various aspects for closer to 10.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, tinkering with a large T, trying different things. When we finally sat down to build a draft, I found I had 3 different versions of the rules with different mods in them, and I had to sort of, okay, little textual comparison here to make sure that everything got in. And it's just so big, and there are so many mods that it really is a new addition. For a while, they were calling it 5, and then we went to 4.2 because we were trying to make it evolutionary. And then we just said, no, this is a new edition. This is 5, and plus after we had a new edition, whatever. So it seemed appropriate.
What did you find to be the most difficult to agree upon, as far as the most?
I don't know, Chris.
What was the most contentious ruling or a set of rulings that, if you feel comfortable talking about?
There were a number of things where there was a lot of discussion with pros and cons about which way to go. One of them was data links. Mm-hmm. We talked about how are we going to do this, and we didn't want to go full hog like the article, because it now you have to worry about data fits and ranges of communications. And I was kind of there with Larry about let's try and avoid C cubed if we can, because it's a god awful nightmare. But we had to deal with cooperative engagement capability, which allowed engage on remote. We had to have something to allow us to deal with those Russian targeting complexes that, as in the article, started with a frickin' Nanuchka 1 back in 72 when we were clueless. And so we cracked the box open a little bit. That's kind of why I called it Pandora's box. Once you crack it open, it's not a little bit anymore. It just goes to hell in a handbasket. So where there was, I wouldn't call it contention, where there was some design friction was in that age-old teeter-totter called playability versus realism. And Larry and I occupy opposite ends on that. I'm more of a realism guy. He's more of a playability guy, which is actually a really good combination to have, because then we get to figure out where things are going. So there's a lot of discussion, and usually we come up with something like the fire control system mods. That took probably most of our time, was sticking fire control, and not so much the process, but how long does it take for you to get a shot, something worthwhile. And then you're looking at anti-air, anti-surface, anti-submarine, and it just gets messy pretty darn fast. But it was something that we knew needed to be done because it was very clear from some of the War College stuff that early on, especially, it took so long to formulate a shot. The book I referenced in the Data Link article, David Bosloff's book, he talks about what drove NTDS development. And, I like to tell people that NTDS is a Minnesota product because the group that did it were in West St. Paul, and a very bright fellow by the name of Cray built the first NTDS transistor-based computer. And Cray's headquarters is right across the street from Mall of America.
Chris and I both grew up in Minnesota. Chris has left and went back to Minnesota. I'm in Virginia because it's warmer down here.
So what's in the water in Minnesota? A lot of gaming originated in that area.
Long winter nights.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up. I gamed with Dave Arneson, playing Dungeons and Dragons. I played with Mike Carr, the guy that went on to do a lot of stuff at TSR, Fight in the Skies, and other things. There was just a lot of gaming going on. That was awesome.
So, Chris, I don't know if you want to go get a little bit into your Data Link article.
We can.
I'm going to show Simplot here a little bit. We'll go into just the basics of that first portion. Let's see if I can share this appropriately. Okay. Hold on. Apparently it has to be up in order to share it. Sorry. Okay.
Ah, yes.
Very nice.
All right. Now, so what I did here is I put in just a couple of the surface units and the air units that were mentioned in the article. So I don't know if you want to break it down, but in the article it goes over combined resolution. I don't know if you might want to just start by talking just shortly about that. So let's just say we're in that first example of your article. These two Sovremny destroyers. Maybe just go with it just a little bit, and then we'll kind of continue through.
All right. So for the big thing about data links is you have to have data available to be passed. All a data link is a pipe to send information. So if you start, you have the two Sovremnies. They both got Mineral or Mineral M, depending on which flavor they are. And if neither one has a detection, data links don't do you any good whatsoever. They can be passing music for all I know. But let's say you have the two mineral-based systems looking, and they both pick up a search radar from a NATO unit. If they both get it, then you go straight to cross bearings, because these are targeting complexes. They've got more than enough resolution, and between the two of them, you can get a good fire control system pretty dang quick, and you're not constrained by range. Now, once those two have a firing solution, one of them or both can pass it via a separate data link to the mod caching. Now, because that's not a real-time data link, there is a time delay. There's also other issues with those type of things. Usually what is a lack of resolution. And what you end up with is not the best shot for the mod caching, excuse me. So, and there's no way it's going to get a better shot than fair, because it doesn't have a targeting complex. Now, from the Russian perspective, that's good enough. So that's how that would work.
So just to summarize, I'll just kind of reflect it back to you. So when two units, they can. So there was two scenarios that were described in your article, and very nicely described. They can combine and gain the bonus benefit mentioned on that same page in your article, which I think for real time gives you a +2 modifier on fire control resolution, right? So if both Sovereigns were in doing a crossfix with passive, they would start, and I think you pointed this out last time I spoke to you, they would start on the active resolution table because of a crossfix, but then they also get the +2 bonus. So let's just say an evaporative duct was out there. So they're not only they're getting that the bonus of the increased radar line of sight, but then they're increasing each other's capability of resolution, which I thought is just brilliant, right? And then, as you were just saying, they would probably end up with a good resolution, or at least maybe not right away, but within probably a tactical turn or two, and they could hand that to the mod cache that's depicted here over near real time. So that's awesome.
The way I explained it to one guy is that because he didn't understand why a passive system would resolve on an active table. And I said, the bottom line is this: you're getting bearing and range. That is what allows you to go to the active table. In this particular case, you have two very high resolution bearings, which means their range error is actually less than a radar. So that's what makes these things so blasted powerful, is they find you fast. And the Russians designed it that way. Okay, so you want to talk about the U.S. side now?
Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. We can move that. Sorry, I was muted. So I'll just summarize just a small little bit of the rest of the article. Was that so if ships with near real time, if let's just say those Sovereigns only had near real time, just for scenario's sake, they would be able to provide it to another unit, but at one resolution lower. Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of the other things that you mentioned in the article is that without TDL or without data link, if you had a passive sender, right, by radio or otherwise, the best you can get actually is a no attack quality. Correct. Or go ahead.
There's I believe you could actually kind of work your way up to poor.
Based on time, though, right? At that point. Yeah, based on time.
But it just a cross fix based on radio communication or cell phone or whatever, the errors involved with that is so big that it's little more than a cueing that there's something out there. One of the things that became very obvious in reading Russian stuff and some Chinese stuff, but they're working off the Russian, so let's just go with the Russian. And then some of the U.S. discussions and some of the European discussions, it became very clear that over-the-horizon targeting without data links was next to impossible.
And then if active sender without TDL, the best they can get is poor quality as well. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Very good article. Very good portion of that article. If you want to talk a little bit about the second example, which was about the data link types and their compatibility.
That's where I did a double example, if you will. I just shifted time a little bit, where in the beginning we have a Burke Flight 1, which has got link 11, which is near real time. And it's also got the earlier version of Hawk Link, which is near real time. Hawk Link, as the name describes, links you to the Seahawk helicopter. It is highly directional, which means the helicopter can only talk to one ship at a time. And it's usually its mothership. Now, if you look at the P3 Orion, by the way, that's an AIP upgrade, because that's where the Link 16 comes in, along with some very lovely EOIR sensors. It's a phenomenal package. I've worked with it a couple of times in exercises. Boy, howdy, it's nice. If the Orion, let's say the Orion does the detection, it can't talk to the Burke or the Seahawk via Link 16. So it's got to go through Link 11, which is near real time. And even then, it can only talk to the Burke. It can't talk to the Seahawk. So if the Burke wanted to have the SH-60B utilize that information, it would have to come from the P3 to the destroyer and the destroyer to the helicopter. Klutzy, but it's better than radio traffic.
Right. There's no timing delay in that, I would assume, either.
There's a little bit of a time delay, but the biggest problem with Link 11 is you've got to consolidate your contacts. One of the problems with Link 11, and this is where the term gridlock comes from, is oftentimes multiple ships detected the same target, but independently put a new contact into the network. So there were times when you had the same contact reported 3 different times, and it was slightly different bearing and ranges, and you do that enough, and pretty soon the whole network starts bogging down, and you don't know who you're talking about. So what would happen is the node control ship, because Link 11 is node base, would say, I have the picture, and it would start the manual process of vetting and getting rid of some of those contacts to anchor the grid. You're trying to do that as you're going, particularly in a combat situation, and all this takes time. It's a manual process. Link 16 does that automatically because they're using a lot of timing involved, a lot of GPS timing as well. So if you go to a Burke Flight 2A, give it Link 16, and you go to an MH-60R with Link 16 and HawkLink, all of a sudden, everybody can talk to everyone else automatically, whether it be direct line of sight, which isn't that great, but almost almost all the Navy commands want to use satellite links anyway because they're less vulnerable. And this way they can pass things around much easier. And it's actionable information right then and there. That's one of the big things about Link 16 that makes it so powerful. And Larry saw this when he ran a scenario with the Japanese running F-35s. And they had Link 16 and the multi-function advanced data link. And with the rules we had, those F-35s were eating J-11s for lunch. Because the J-11s had no idea what was going on, and all the Japanese units not only knew what was going on, but knew who was firing at who and who had the next one up on deck.
It was a big surprise to everybody, myself included. We had luckily the Chinese guy was in the business, more or less. I mean, he understood naval warfare, worked at some sort of a lab on stuff. He couldn't tell me what, of course. But so when this stuff started happening, I went, yep, that's about right. That's what we're figuring. And it just shows now another person played that same scenario and they misused their stealth capability or maybe depended on it a little too much or something. And they lost, even though they had all these tremendous advantages. So it's not like a a complete advantage over the other side, but it is a useful tool. I think what all of us have to do, myself included, is we have, up and until the publication of this naval SIDREP, 5859 that just came out like this week, we've just done a little bit of hand waving on data links. And now we have to treat them as a component of the platform on the same level as the radars, as the sonars, as their ES gear. It's has a name, it has a function, it has capabilities, and we're just going to have to learn how to use those tools to get the information we need to get a fire control solution so we can kill the other guy.
I personally think that the article clarifies it very well, Chris, by the way. I think you were kind of mentioning before, hinting at you thought that this was, at least originally you thought that this would get too detailed, but oddly enough, my analysis is that it clarifies it. It might seem like more, but it just streamlines it and clarifies it for me, at least personally. I found them to be very clear. I think one of my eureka moments when I was talking to you last time, week or so, was it wasn't getting through to my brain that you could combine, right? And as soon as you explained that, it was a light bulb for me. And then just really driving home that it was time, like we were talking about before, everything kind of in this more streamlined game is very time sensitive, and that clarified it for me too. It's just as a non-previous Harpoon gamer. So,
well, I'm glad it's working for you. I mean, we now have a new Annex L, which is going to be listing all the data links and who uses them and what their capabilities are. We've got we'll be including their fits in Annex A and Annex B. So we'll add the information in for Russia's and the U.S. stuff, and of course, going forward, the new China's Navy will have the data links included when it's first published. This is a huge change for the game. It's not quite 5.1, but it's what 5 needs to make 5 work, I guess.
Yeah, when we get to high tide, which we got a couple of guys working on right now, including Kevin Martell, trying to drag him into the design world. One of the things that, while working on all these data links, I absolutely stumbled across a couple of historical articles by Russians on the development of Russian air defense data links. So there's like 4 different generations. There are subsets within each one. And they talk about not only which fighters they can talk to, how many fighters they can talk to, which SAMs they can talk to, and what the radio networks look like. These are all functional diagrams that have to be broken out into English. But the nice thing is that all of these descriptions follow the same sort of orientation with the symbology and then the way they put them together. So you can go and say, oh, okay, that's the fighter part. That's the SAM part. And we're going to try and push some of this into high tide because it's really kind of cool stuff to finally see, out in the open. And the Russians really like to talk about history. The one thing I really appreciate about Russians is their value of history. They got us beat in spades on that. They just know it matters, whereas I have a hard time convincing people that stuff like that is of importance to us.
Well, I thought we might segue over to some questions. There was some questions on high tide and so forth. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and show this. Never used this before. Let's see what happens. So this is one question that came up. When might high tide drop on reviewers?
When might high tide drop on reviewers? Why does Fred Flintstone care? It's not a brontosaurus burger. Um, we've got we were taking out a lot of the scenarios from High Tide because they dealt on convoy things. And one of the things we finally really came to grips with is just how poor the Russians believe they could do a campaign against convoys. You know, we talk about the backfire multi-regiment strikes and all that until you look at how they describe it, and they don't have the refueling assets. If they sent backfires, it was going to be one missile per aircraft because they couldn't get there with two. They were really stretched logistically to reach down into the Atlantic on a consistent basis. So their whole discussion is, right, we draw a line north of the GI-UK gap. Anything that comes across that line, we stomp it like a rat. So theirs was very defensively orientated. And once you understand that, half the scenarios in High Tide as we published it just don't work. So we're going to flush them, and we're going to concentrate more on things like carrier operations in Vestia Fjord, a little bit more in the Baltic. We're going to look at stuff going after the Russian bastions, you know, that sort of thing. Some submarines are going to come down, so we've got some room to play there. But it's you're not going to see what was in Red Storm Rising. We're not going to have a Battle of the Atlantic Mark III here.
If we send a carrier battle group north into the Norwegian Sea, you will see regimental-sized backfire strikes, but they're not. They're and really that was shown by the Keflavik Turkey shoot as well. One of the games we played a long time ago, getting ready for Red Storm Rising. That was a bloodbath for the backfires, and these are large, expensive aircraft that can't be replaced in combat. And if you remember back to your World War II math, if you got like 10% attrition on a mission, that was an amazing, that was a terrible defeat because you could not sustain that over a period of time. So they're not going to risk those bombers, which are a strategic asset, unless there's a equally vital target that has to be hit. And convoys don't qualify.
So as far as time is concerned, we're looking at next year. We'll get into the stuff we're working on. We're working on Dawn of the Battleships, both the rule mods and In Mahan's Wake, which is the non-US centric version of Monroe's Legacy. And then we've got China's Navy up ahead. After that is High Tide and probably South Atlantic War, depending upon which one can get done first.
I was going to vote for South Atlantic War. Go for that. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure you would, because I mean,
I've been reading up on it pretty heavily, so
I'm just disappointed that Sandy Woodward.
Plug for South Atlantic for Falkland's book.
Yeah, really.
Check it out. Good book.
Good book.
And I mean, and there is stuff from here that will go into. I mean, in addition to bringing it up to 5th edition standard, we are going to be updating the data in the book as well, because the Argentines are now writing about the war
In detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big things that came out of Larry's relationship with Sandy Woodward is there was a lot of times where I would get emails from the good Admiral. Basic along the lines, this part of your game is absolute rubbish. Fix it.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's like, sir. One of them was the layer. So the layer change in Harpoon 5 is entirely due to the fact that Sandy Woodward beat me around the head and shoulders with a cricket bat until I got something where he said, "That looks good."
If Sandy Woodward says it looks good, it's good. I mean, it was amazing to be able to correspond with him. I mean, with email. I'm sure you read, if you've got Harpoon 5 and you haven't read that obit in the front, please do. Because, I mean, really felt privileged to be able to reach out to this guy and say, hey, talk about naval warfare with this, and it was like talking with Jellicoe or something. It was an amazing experience. I mean, he'd say something, and like, I'm writing everything down, and I'm like, what can I steal and use in the game? Because this is good stuff.
Yeah, I'm just finishing up 100 Days. It's an incredible book.
What?
Great book.
He would wax poetically, and about one of his missions when he was, I think he had Warspite, and he starts going off about this underhaul he did on Moscow, and I'm going, sir, can we be talking about that right now on an open channel? And he'd ask a question. He says, I saw this canoe under Moscow. I said, yeah, that's the sonar dome.
Dome is an incorrect term. Growth.
Yeah.
Bulge.
He came back and said, my Lord, no wonder it couldn't ride on an even keel. The Moskvas had trim problems. They were heavy forward. And if you ever look at a diagram, and if you don't have one, I'll send you one, and you look at this beast of a sonar that's right down in the middle of the superstructure, you now know why she's tilted by the bow. Well, the Russians couldn't do anything about it. So how they corrected it is they drew the water line at a cant so that it looks straight to those of us driving by.
Well, they also wanted to wanted that line there, so if it got any worse, they know about it.
Well, that's what the draft mark's all about, isn't it?
Is she supposed to be down by the ball? Not that much.
So yeah, there were, and there's a lot of neat things that we can that with high tide we can fold in, because when you look at things like Moskva, its ASW capability is really all or nothing. It's either a nuke or it's nothing, because they had such trouble directing helicopters, and the KA-25s were apparently maintenance nightmares. They had a real hard time with readiness rates.
Yeah. We can probably model that somehow.
It's probably that the transmission for that bloody counter-rotating propeller set. It's got to be ugly.
I'll bring in another question here.
Okay.
Wondering if we'll ever see a deluxe box set, maps, counters, rules, annexes, etc.
Yeah, like, would that we could. I mean, we were lucky in finding the Wargame Vault, who can print, and they can actually do maps, but they can't do counters. We have been looking for, quote, counters on demand, unquote, technology for several years now, and nobody has it. We've got legacy counters that Clash of Arms is selling, and we're grateful that they've still got stock, and that those counters still obviously work with the new edition. But we can't make boxes. We cannot make any. I mean, we'd love to do physical components to support our game, but the technology is just not there. We are a virtual company.
Unfortunately, most companies are at this point, where they will be, or they will continue to be. But but I like how you're thinking about it. How do we virtually box something together, or at least the components?
We're trying to talk with a couple of companies that have indicated that they may be able to adapt to our production philosophy, because the big thing is we can't keep stock, and we don't want to mail.
It'd be kind of interesting if a miniatures company would do like even small box sets and potentially, I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Well, I mean, Shapeways sort of does that. I mean, there's a guy named Aaron Rodriguez who runs an outfit called Objects May Appear, ... on Shapeways. And he has, at our request, generated whole product lines that we talked about in the SITREP. One for the Spanish Civil War and one for Bywater's War using Chris's designs. And from a miniatures guy point of view, being able to say, it's that one mini for the Jupiter class, whatever that the Spanish had, is available in multiple scales, and it looks good painted up. So, and for instance, for this issue, Aaron generated the Project 1165 Russian nuclear cruiser, and you can go order that. And more stuff for me to paint, but I'm okay with that. The point, I don't know if we're ever going to see a box set. The resources are there, but they're scattered around in different places. And until we can bundle those ourselves, I think our main method is to let people know where these different pieces are so they can go get it. And to a certain extent, they can get the parts they want and ignore the rest.
Now we've got our Spanish friend Alex who does those counters.
Oh my God.
He's willing to put more together, and God bless him. He works fast. And Larry and I have been talking to Kevin Martell about coming up with at least things that people can download and put on cardstock or whatever with NTDS symbology markers. We can also do our own set of general counters. But again, all we're providing is the paper that you have to cut and paste onto cardstock and things like that. That's about the best that we can do right now.
And if anybody out there knows where there's any counter-on-demand capability, get in touch with us, please. We'd love to improve the product. Hey, John.
Here's another question. Will you consider doing more step-by-step examples similar to Normland's article in October SITREP?
Yeah, we've actually thought about not so much like a SITREP thing, but Larry and I have been pondering the idea of doing a couple of virtual demonstrations. Maybe do maritime patrol aircraft hunting for a submarine. Both sides, the U.S., the Soviets. Just try that. We can also look at how to run a submarine versus surface ship game with Simplot. It's a heck of a lot easier to run one of those now. And that's what I would use. So we're kind of thinking about doing a couple of those and merging them together so that people can see different types of the warfare areas. Because writing about submarine encounters is pretty damn boring. Sorry, Glenn. ASW stands for awfully slow warfare.
We've gotten a lot of favorable comments on the Jumpstart, which was totally different than what we started out wanting to do. But going to that annotated formation diagram based on Simplot, I think really helped people visualize what's going on. So we could do some more like that, and for other types of engagements to illustrate different parts of the rules. Of course, there's always the as soon as the clones become available, I think our production will increase greatly. We can answer questions, we can edit rules, we can research, but until I get more than 24 hours in a day, we're kind of limited.
The tyranny of the clock.
I'll bring another question in here. Any thoughts on adding autonomous systems to the game?
They're already there. The way we run autonomous systems is we limit your ability to control them. If you have human in the loop, which means you are directly talking to the UAV, USV, whatever, if you are directly talking, you can maneuver it as if it were a ship. It's not a fighter plane. No, you're not dogfighting. You're not responding in 30 seconds. I've seen enough videos of UAVs getting shot down where the first idea we had is we saw the flames flicker into the field of view. So no, you don't have a lot of control. Now, once you go to autonomous, you have even less control. You can execute orders on an intermediate turn basis. And that's really what unmanned vehicles restrict you to. It's your ability to control them. If they've got weapons, you can use them. But if you can't detect, and it's sometimes a real pain, when we see all these nice little videos of UAVs directing laser-guided ordnance into somebody, what people don't realize is the UAV has been staring at that target for a while. This is not instant, I found it, I'm shooting. No, it's I went to a place, I started looking. After a while, I think I saw what I wanted. I verified it's what I wanted. And then I dropped a laser-guided bomb on his little wee head.
I had a couple questions that were asked to me pre-meeting here. One was from Javi on Facebook. Ask when are we going to get a ground combat supplement? I think we kind of talked about this a little bit before we started. Or at least
warned you about that.
Or at least the formulas in a sit rep.
Okay.
God, there's no way you're getting the formulas. They're huge.
Okay, the whole ground combat thing, you know, I almost had it, and then it got away from me. I mean, that's the best way. We, like Harpoon, you know, we tried certain things to make it work. I took it down to Historicon. I had the group play it. Different, but it never got past the internal playtest stage because I couldn't make the combat tables work, and I was probably trying to do too much. My background is naval miniatures game. Why I thought I could design a hex-based ground combat game. Why any of that skill would transfer over to that other genre, if you will. But I haven't given up on it. It's just, you know, we just finished doing Harpoon 5 not that long ago in July, and we're still getting spooled up on that. Eventually, we're going to move on to other games that we want to do. I would love to have the ground combat game as an adjunct. Now, I don't think you're ever going to have a ground combat and naval combat going on simultaneously.
The timing is just completely off.
So,
I mean, you can have naval strikes into a ground combat game. You can certainly have coastal units attack ships, but the real benefit is when you're looking at all those amphibious ships, which in most games are simply targets, and all of a sudden you're very concerned with how many troops and how many boats they have and how quickly they can get stuff to the beach, and then what happens after they get to the beach. And it just is an entirely new dimension. Now, the fact that amphibious operations are the single most complex military evolution you can imagine, and that includes a regimental backfire strike, because that's just one thing going on and one other thing. This is like lots of different things going on at the same time. It's gonna take a while.
So will
I
that
want to
be
get back to it, but it's, you know, sorry, not yet.
Are you considering that to be a complete rewrite of the ground warfare from South Atlantic War II, or would it be just a new generation of that? Or
it would probably be a simplified and more abstracted version of
okay,
that.
all right.
I mean, the nodal-based combat system that movement system we used in South Atlantic War isn't flexible enough for a more general purpose game. And I really want to have it be a general purpose game.
That's what I was wondering about, because personally I find that the system is very good for what it's being used for within the confines of that scenario book. As a matter of fact, I think it's pretty brilliant in how it just kind of crunches all the numbers down into a kill ratio table and stuff. So personally, I think it's great. I've done a lot of land warfare. So I'm glad you mentioned that you were actually trying to make it more general use. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the problem was in 2 conventions, Larry started running a game. I broke it in one convention, and one of our other guys, who's a former Army tanker, he broke it, and that's frustrating.
I've still got a boatload of data, and I'm always collecting more data to validate the whole ground combat system formula. I mean, I could write an article about how that formula came together. And, I read Trevor Dupuy and then ran with that, and other guys also read it, and they started doing stuff, and then we built on that. But
the guy who put it together initially, Chip Sayers, really understands Dupuy's approach. The problem is a lot of what Dupuy did is it was based on, if you will, the Delphi technique, where you get a bunch of experts together and they kind of figure out, well, this is what we think it would look like. And that's really what their hero approach is like. Well, in some areas, I could technically point and say, no, it don't work that way. And so we tried to put a little more rigor. And part of the problem with that more rigor is, like the data link article, you open up the box and all kinds of stuff comes flying out that you had no idea was going to come around and bite you in your hindquarters, because it was not even on your radar scope, and now all of a sudden it's breaking the system.
Very much so. I mean, there's things we want to do, and we're just going to have to get in there and grind until we can get a decent design put together. It's on the list, but it's going to be a while.
Very good. Brought in another question real quick from Connor Bell. He's from the Discord server. Give him a shout out. My only question that I've been curious about: what is the plan to grow the ATG community?
Okay, if you mean by community, everybody who plays the games? Do you mean the design team? Whatever.
Connor, I don't know if you want to reply in the YouTube chat, but I think what he's meaning is more from the player community side, getting people together, growing the player base. Correct me if I'm wrong, Connor.
That has been historically always been a problem. For one, we are a niche game or a niche system in a niche market. Niche squared means small. That's just kind of the way it is. Now, what we've been trying to do in the past to help grow the community is, one, we want the community to write. The big thing that Larry and I always hearken upon, and if you look at the ATG logo, there's a book at the base of our shield. It's about education. We want to be educational and entertaining. And the best way to really encompass that is to grab something and write an article and send it to us. A lot of our designers were one-off individuals that sent something in, and then we beat it back and forth, and we put it in the sit rep. And that experience either scared the daylights out of the individual, or they were masochistic and liked it. And they started providing more things. And that brought in more people. The other thing we can do is like what we're doing now with you. is reach out, answer questions, and try and deal with the issues that people have playing the games. We also do a lot, well, when we can, we do conventions. Larry does Origins religiously. We do HMGS Cold Wars, HMGS Historicon, and one of our guys does Fall In. And we have Mike Harris down in the Norfolk area. There's a gaming convention down there that he occasionally goes in and helps out with. We really push conventions.
Andy Doty's out at Enfilade as well.
That's right. He's got Enfilade. Yeah.
And I think Steve Thorne joins him out there.
Right.
We've got a large group of very knowledgeable, very motivated guys who support the system. And in terms of growing, I mean, actually, we just went through a bit of a growth spurt. In addition to Peter, your whole Discord thing, you're drawing in people like crazy. We've added several people doing designs for us that have never worked for us before because they said, "Hey, I want to design for Harpoon 5," and so we're giving them that chance. We have a French translation of the rules that's underway. He called us up, or emailed, I should say, and said, "Hey, I just translated Harpoon 4.1." And I went, "You know there's a new version coming out." Yeah, but I did 4.1 anyway. Okay. Want to do 5? And he thought about it for a while. And he thought, oh, sure, why not? So he's working on 5 now. He's also working on a French Navy supplement and a French scenario supplement for us. So we are growing, and frankly, I don't know if we can managing growth can be a challenge in and of itself, but we are growing, and we want to grow more.
So it does look like you have a convention page on the Admiralty Trilogy, and so just be on the lookout there. And
those are actually really good events if you can attend one, because we do presentations. If you look at the presentation page on the ATG website, we put up on a PDF file every presentation that we have done throughout the years. We try to span historical, technical, tactical issues. We don't try to get into a rut too much, but there's a lot of neat things in there that people can grab onto and look at. If you want to know about Chinese anti-ship cruise missiles, I did one a while back on the YJ-8 family. That, if I say so myself, is pretty good.
So just to, we're getting past an hour here. I think we've mentioned all the products that were being worked on. Was there anything else that is being worked on that we might not have mentioned so far?
Well, we're now supporting 4 core games, and finally. And if you run down the list, In My Hand's Wake is first. We've got a Command C supplement called Clear the Coast, which a new designer is working on. He's done some stuff for us a long time ago, and now he's back. And that'll be sort of more small stuff, but it should be a lot of fun.
Mighty Midgets 2 is what we call it.
Yeah, well, that's Clear the Coast was the final. Next Mighty Midgets, the next generation. We figured there'd be copyright issues.
Yeah.
We've talked about Harpoon. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Our hopper is really full on that one. God And Dread Nought, we owe everybody a supplement with the U.S. and the Japanese and other navies of that era. There are scenarios that are possible in the Med, for instance, with the Balkan War, that type of stuff. So there's plenty of material for us to chew on, and we're just trying to streamline the publication process as much as possible. So all these designers don't deliver their drafts to us on the same day, and we've got this editorial train wreck.
So right now we're looking at Larry's talked about doing a administrative upgrade, if you will, to Dawn of the Battleships. That will not be a new edition. If people have bought it, they'll be getting a note from the Wargame Vault for a new upgraded PDF. Again, just bringing Dawn of the Battleship, Dawn of the Rising Sun, and Fear God Dread Nought kind of into the same bucket, if you will. And then in Mahan's wake, we'll have the Sino-Japanese War. I don't know why you want to play that one. I've looked at it. It never will go well for the Chinese.
Yeah, but it's fun to paint up the minis.
And then we've got a lot of could have beens in the Mediterranean, into the I don't think there's any in the Baltic, but the Aegean. They've got some for the Boxer Rebellion. I'm working on the Taku forts right now, much to my pain, because I'm running across these 15-centimeter Krupp C66, 1866 rifled muzzle loaders. Oh, my aching back. And then after that, we've got China's Navy being worked on by Peter Grining, pulling things together. And then Larry and I will start going through the annexes, the system annexes, getting those up to speed. And then Larry will pull Annex A and Annex B together, rather than trying to doing it at the same time, which is incredibly frustrating. We're going to finish the system annexes first, make sure everybody nods their head smartly, and then he will build.
It's called the pillage then burn principle.
Yes. And then
It's reverse Hannibal.
he's the China Navy supplement will not be the data annex for modern Chinese maritime forces. There's way too many things that don't shoot in there. And
very, very good point. Well, they're two very different books, and we've gotten questions on this, so let's distinguish the two. Modern Chinese Maritime Forces covers vessels currently in service for the Navy, Coast Guard, Maritime Surveillance Service, the Hong Kong Garrison. I mean, the Ladies Auxiliary in Yangchao. I mean, there's all these different paramilitaries that make up Chinese state maritime power. But no systems data, no game-related data, and all those gorgeous drawings. It's also by Manfred Meyer, and he picks his numbers. So we usually agree, but it's not a requirement that we agree. We do talk. Now, China's Navy is going to be just the Navy and the Coast Guard, but it's going to be from 1955 till now. So that's a much broader scope. And you will have not only ships, but aircraft. And you will have not only ships and aircraft, but all the systems data for the weapons and sensors and data links. And that will all be in there. So while there's some crossover of data, they're really two very different publications. And keeping it all straight is going to make you a little crazy, but what the heck? That's why they pay me the big bucks.
Well, I think we'll probably wrap it up here. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your evenings here. And I've enjoyed it a lot. I hope we can do this again, maybe in a couple months, just as you get to a new little resting point, if you will, maybe towards the new year.
Well, probably the best thing to do, Peter, is let's figure out a schedule, and then let's find a way for people to dump questions. And that way, when we come on, we know what questions need to be answered. We can deal with some of them, and then we can deal with any follow-on stuff from people from the YouTube channel.
Sure, absolutely. Sounds good.
I think that sounds like an excellent plan.
Yep. We shall schedule it.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
All right, take care.